Hi there, and welcome back to the Seeking True Faith podcast, where we dive into topics of faith and the church and doctrine. This week, we are supposed to be talking about the church history. I'm going to admit right off the bat that I am not prepared. Not because of a lack of trying, but because there is so much information to go through. But I wanted to go ahead and make a episode this week, and it's going to be a mini episode. I wanted to just talk about some of the sources that I'm using, and also just to ask for you to continue to send me information. I have been in discussion with some people that have a lot of resources on the history of the church, but there is, I'm sure, a lot of people that have things that I don't have. I have literally stayed up till like 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning, like 3 times, just because I was so engrossed in what I was reading and researching that I just couldn't even tear myself away from it. So I've got several things. This is the book that Brother Jack Robinson wrote on the history of the church. Sister Vi Hamner from Indiana wrote a book called The Harvest is Ripe. Got this book, which is The Heritage of Faith. It was put together about the Welling, Oklahoma church. All of this was put together by Sister Helen Tomlinson. Some recollections by my wife's dear aunt, Sister Shirley Taylor. I've just got so many other just pages and notes. Recently I was informed of a possible connection to what's called the Rogerine Church. And it looks like they started around the 1600s is when we started them. But you can just see, like, I've got notes everywhere. This is the book on the Rogerines. I've been researching this, reading, highlighting, just going through in depth so many different things. I've got a book that I've ordered, and that was actually a big part of why I decided to postpone. This is a big topic. I think that it's something that mattered a lot to me, being raised in the church. The church history is something that I had studied into pretty extensively about 13 years ago. I got really engrossed in it and trying to understand it. Something that I'm really committed to, and why I'm postponing on this topic, is I'm really committed to facts. And I want facts to be foremost. Probably most of you that are listening to this podcast have looked at the Wikipedia article for the church. There are some really strong opinions on how that's written up. I'm going through a lot of Latter-day Saint documentation. There are the book that I'm waiting on. It is a book that was written by an elder in the Reorganized Latter-day Saints Church, and he was a contemporary and had some dealings with John Burton. And if you know very much about the history of the church, you will hear that name Burton come up. So there's David MacDonald, there's Elias Brewer, there's John Burton, and Derry was somebody that had a lot of interactions with Burton. So I wanted his autobiography. I wanted to get a copy of that and go through it, because just like anything else, I'm not just taking one thing and saying, hey, I'm going to build my position based off of this one person or this one idea, but I'm taking all of these things, and I've been writing out timelines to try to understand, okay, what does this say about the history of the church, the baptismal lineage? What does this say about the history of the church and the baptismal lineage? What does this say about the history of the church and the baptismal lineage? There's newspaper articles from Kansas that mention the true followers. There are newspaper articles from Stillwater that mention the true followers. I've got another book on my bookshelf back there that is the history of the Rocky and Fay area that mentions the followers of Christ. So all that to say, I'm not taking this lightly. I was visiting with a brother just last night. He's very well studied in the history of the church, and he's put together a lot of resources. And I was telling him that there's some things I'm not convinced, some positions that he's taken that I'm not convinced based off sources that I've seen. But then he also did send me some sources and some things that I had not seen yet. And some of those things did have implications for the way I was interpreting events. So I'm taking all of that into consideration, and I'm really trying to build out the most solid case. Now here's the thing. No matter how hard I try, there will not be a 100% signed, sealed, this is what happened, because there's too much time gone by. The main events that I will probably spend most of my time focusing on are going to be events that happened in the mid 1800s. That's probably an area where I will spend more time focusing on, because it's an area where I feel like there is enough information out there that we can build out a pretty clear picture of some of the events that happened. This is 3 out of 10 of what's called the Ante-Nicene Fathers set. These are all of the, as of the late 1800s, it was all of the church writings that were in existence from the time of the apostles until the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. So there's a lot of history here. Justin Martyr, you've got Irenaeus, you've got Clement of Alexandria, you've got Tertullian. Now, I know not everybody gets into that, and there's just a lot of opinions on church history, whether it's just church history as a general. The Catholics kind of have their take, Protestants have their take. Our church has traditionally taught that we trace a direct line back to the apostles. So there's all these things to balance and try to thoroughly examine. I do want to talk about the early church. That's an area I love. The early church. There's been some outstanding things that I've learned about the history of Christianity from the time of the apostles all the way up through the Reformation that happened in Europe around the 1500s. There's always been pockets that disagreed with the mainstream. Sometimes they were probably right on some things. Sometimes they were not right on some things. But there's just a lot of depth. So I think that's going to have to be a separate episode. And maybe I wind up splitting this into 2 different episodes. That's a real possibility, where one episode I really kind of try to discuss our specific history, and then the other episode where I go in and look at church history as a whole. It's probably what I'm going to wind up doing, because there's just no possible way that I'll be able to fit both of those subjects into one episode. I'm kind of giving you a setup right now of some of the research that I'm putting into this, which doesn't mean I'm infallible. I don't want to come across here and be like, well, trust me because I'm doing X, Y, and Z. I think that most of us believe that there are things that we can take for fact, and I think those things we should take for fact, and there are things that are maybe a little more gray or unknown, and I don't think we should be trying to bind our opinions as facts on those things. And so I'm going to really try, by the help of God, to go through this topic in a way that honors the facts that can be found, and then also areas that we don't have all of the details. With all that said, I really, truly, truly want you to help me. If there are histories or information that deal with John Burton, David MacDonald, Elias Brewer, Marion Reese, Jim Caldwell, Monroe Testament, Woods Rutherford, which Woods Rutherford, by the way, is my great-great-great-grandpa. He's up there in my lineage. These are men specifically that I have a very significant amount of interest in. I'm doing a lot of research on those men specifically because I think they connect more of the puzzle pieces for what we can really tighten down on and understand. So those are the names that I'm very interested in. And of course, if you have names beyond that, please share those things. If you have specific information, especially specific names that are like, hey, here's a connection. The connection is here. This is how. Very interested in that because I want to present all the facts as clearly as possible. Hopefully, I will be ready to do that by next week. It's entirely possible I won't be ready to do that by next week. Hopefully I am. That's truly is my goal. I really want to have one of these episodes out every week. And if for some reason I'm not to that point, then maybe what I will do for next week is maybe I'll start by going through kind of some general church history, because I can just kind of give you guys like a high level overview of the history of Christianity, because Christianity's been around for 2,000 plus years. You know, Christ died, he was crucified around the year 32 AD. I think a lot of times about what Peter said, that he's endeavored after his departure to keep them always in remembrance of these things. So the things that he had taught. And I think it's so cool because he succeeded in that. And the scripture is preached. Christianity has endured. But we have to look at all of that and say, you know, there's things that we're not going to be able to pinpoint down 100%. But yeah, resources you have that I don't have, please send them to me. I've got several different things saved on my computer here that discuss different things that I've gotten from various ones. You know, I don't want to, I'm trying to think, because some people may not want their names mentioned on the podcast, so I want to honor that. But I've gotten various topics and documents and snippets and notes and all kinds of from different people. I'm just trying to weed through all of that and build the most cohesive and most fact-based argument that I can for, hey, this is what happened, and this is how we got from point A to point B, as clearly as I can, anyways, with the people that we know about. So Burton is really where the line stops for me as far as for sure people in the lineage of baptism. So if you have somebody beyond Burton, then I would love for you to share those details so that I can include that information. I know there's a lot of speculation, and I am more interested in things that can be proven by fact. My mom was a Rutherford, but I don't have any real information on Woods Rutherford other than an interview that he gave to an LDS elder that was posted in the Ripley Times magazine around the year 1899. So maybe there's even some of my family that has more information on Brother Woods Rutherford, and I'd love to hear it. So I hope that helps. You know, it's just like I said, it's a huge topic, and I also realize it's a topic that people have some very strong emotions about. I was raised with the understanding that our church has a lineage directly back to the apostles. That was how I was raised, and so my goal is truly just to try to look at what I can prove from fact as much as possible. There's a lot of information here, and there's been a lot of it that's been fairly surprising to me that I've learned over the years. But there's been some things that I've grown from as well, and it's allowed me to try to push myself further in my relationship with the Lord. So I just want to encourage us that we seek truth above all things, that we base our walk with the Lord on our walk with Jesus Christ, and make that the first and the foremost thing, that we're focusing on Christ, we're focusing on doctrine, and as Paul warned, not being caught up in endless genealogies. You know, we can kind of set a genealogy up as our idol, and I think that is probably not the most wise thing that we can do, but we want to put Christ as our goal, and we want to set our eyes on Jesus and make him our number one, and then allow the Spirit of God to work through us in our lives and in our actions and the way we conduct ourselves and the things that we believe, and make that the top priority. Thank you so much for tuning in. That's really, I think, all I'm going to say on this week's episode, or mini episode, if you want to call it that, because I don't want to dive in too deeply into what I have now, because I'm open to the fact that my opinion might change on some things. I don't want to be too hasty in saying, here's what I think about this, or here's where the evidence leads here. I really want to evaluate as much evidence as I can to create the most truthful and solid foundation for this episode, because I know that this is a very important topic to a lot of people. So I would appreciate your prayers. I want to honor the facts surrounding the church. I want to honor the church history. I want to honor the good and the bad. And I want us to learn and grow from the things that we hear on this podcast. So that's my goal, is that this can encourage and strengthen and edify. So I am going to continue my research. I'm going to continue putting together my notes, and hopefully I can dive into this next week. If not, then it will be a general church history topic, which is still a fantastic topic. So many amazing and wonderful stories from church history as a whole. So I don't want to downgrade that as being something not worth listening to. But no, I love this stuff. I love the history of the church. I love learning what the brethren have been through. And, it could be an entire episode in and of itself, sharing some of the awesome testimonies that I've read going through some of these books. Like Brother Jack Robinson, he interviewed so many older brethren, including my great-grandpa Byers. Brother Jack Robinson's book, one of his family members reach out to me and send me some snippets from it, and I forgot that I had it. And then I started going through all of my documents and found that I actually had a copy of it. This brother, thank you for sending me those snips. It did actually help refresh my memory as I was looking through some of that. I was like, man, that is familiar. And so then I went and found the book. So there's a lot of really beautiful testimonies and stories. And, I wish I would have time to share all those things with you. I just won't. That won't be the focus of the podcast this time around, but maybe at another time, maybe for another topic, that would be something worth diving into. Man, guys, I have found a lot more than I realized that I would find, and I've been scrubbing through a lot of old internet archives for old newspapers, and I found some really interesting things, and I've been sent some really interesting things. So again, I think there's so much that we can learn from this. And we're going to focus on facts. We're going to try to paint as complete a picture as possible. I want to be sure and confident in what I say before I say it. And so I don't want to insinuate that I think one thing or another before I put it down on paper, build out my timeline, and pray over it, and make sure that I'm confident putting it forward as my position on something. Agree with me or disagree with me. Whenever you put your position out there online, it definitely opens you up to criticism, which is fine. Like I said, starting this podcast, it's never been my goal for people to just blindly follow me or agree with what I say. I don't want you to do that. I want people to take what I say and have it prompt them to get into the Word of God. So like I end every episode, prove all things and hold fast to that which is good. So we'll see you next week. And again, if you have resources, documents, histories, baptismal lineages, especially of those men that I mentioned, please, please, please send me an email to seekingtruefaith@gmail.com. Again, that's seekingtruefaith@gmail.com. Thanks so much. Bye.